Good day, creative spirit, and welcome. We'll start our session today singing from More Voices, number 138, My Love Colors Outside the Lines. My love colors outside the lines, exploring paths few could ever find, and takes me into places that I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. My Lord, it colors outside the lines, turns wounds to blessings, water into wine, and takes me into places where I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. We'll never walk on water if we're not prepared to drown. Body and soul need a soaking from time to time. And we'll never move the gravestones if we're not prepared to die and realize there are worlds outside the lines. My soul longs to color outside the lines, tear back the curtains, suppose I hitch and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before, throw open doors to worlds outside the lines. We'll never walk on water if we're not prepared to drown. Body and soul need a soaking from time to time. And we'll never move the gravestones if we're not prepared to die and realize there are worlds outside the lines. Let's try that verse one more time. My soul wants to color outside the lines, tear back the curtains, sun come in and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before, and open doors to worlds outside the lines. No one says I wasn't coloring outside the lines in that one. All right. And our next hymn will be from Voices United, and it is number 372, Though I May Speak. Or if you were to ever look it up online, it goes by Gift of Love, which is also the name of the tune. All right. Though I May Speak. Though I may speak with bravest fire, and have the gift to all inspire, and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but let me gain my love within, the profit soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed, by this we worship and are free. Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is upon us. And so I have a reading for you today called Love and Hospitality. And this comes from abbeyofthearts.com. And the author, Christine Valtner's Paintner, says, "Dearest dancing monks, a few days ago I received an email from a woman who was writing her dissertation and asked me to respond to the question, if you had to choose one spiritual practice that is a non-negotiable for spiritual growth in the 21st century, what would it be and why?" My answer was supposed to be short and succinct. Here was my reply. I would choose hospitality, both inner and outer, because I believe the welcoming in all of the exiled pieces of ourselves to be essential for the healing of the world. Of course, it is one of the principles of the Monk Manifesto and feels like a necessary gateway to silence, which the ancient desert monks described as a deep inner stillness. As I was thinking about writing this love note, I realized Valentine's Day is coming, which for many of us is a holiday that only serves to make us feel inadequate, as all highly commercialized things do. And yet, the message of love is worth repeating if we can look beneath the chocolate hearts and flowers and the expectation that we all be in a significant relationship or be lacking. When I read the question posed above, I did not hesitate in my response because I find that this is the heart of our work, creating a safe space where monks can begin welcoming back in the stranger within, and in the process discover the hidden wholeness of which Thomas Merton wrote. Over the years, I have come to realize that more than anything else I do, this work of healing is most essential. The Abbey, too, strives to be a safe place where a diversity of people with a wide range of beliefs and convictions can gather. I love that people show up each with their own longings. Last week, I shared that I was feeling under the weather. I pulled back from as much activity as I could and allowed myself some space to cocoon. I trusted my body's longings, and in the process, I'm feeling better physically, but also some important spiritual shifts are happening that needed the space of quiet to unfold. This trust is an act of great love toward myself. Rather than pushing through, I made the choice to welcome and yield. The same happens when we consider the parts of ourselves that feel less desirable, the parts we resist. Maybe there is a deep loneliness as this holiday of roses and Hallmark approaches. What would it be like to welcome in that lonely part of yourself and to love him, to trust that she has a place in you? Maybe there is self-judgment and criticism that you try to push away. What would it be like to make space, to sit with these difficult parts with compassion and listen to what they really want to tell you? This would be a generous act of loving. This radical hospitality is a lifelong journey. We are always discovering new aspects of our inner world which we reject or resist and need love and care. And in the process of welcoming them in, we perhaps begin to discover that others don't annoy us quite so much. As we grow more intimate with our own place of exile and woundedness, we discover a deep well of compassion for the strangeness of others. As we come to know our own compulsions and places of grasping, we can offer more love to those in our lives struggling with addictions and other places where freedom has been lost. For the last few months, I have signed this love note with great and growing love, but never explained the choice I made. I started after finding some old letters written by my mother and father to one another in the early days of their marriage. I had forgotten that one of their terms of endearment for one another was GGL, which stood for Great and Growing Love. These missives all began and ended with those 3 letters. Even though my parents' wounds eventually led them to separation and my father to rejecting much of the love offered to him toward the end of his life, I still treasure this image. I cherish knowing that there was this sense of love abiding between them, growing slowly. Rather than feeling despair or cynicism, I actually feel a great tenderness to know of all the places love plants her seeds. I love each of you, my dear monks. I don't think the intensity of this work is sustainable without that kind of love. I love your seeking hearts. I love your desire to find a more compassionate way to be in this life and on this earth. As I continue to offer love to myself through acts of trust in my body's wisdom and welcoming in the less flattering parts of myself, the love grows. My beloved John will often say, "I love you more," and I respond by asking, "More than what?" And his reply is, "More than yesterday." We have been blessed with 23 years of growing love. My invitation to you as Valentine's Day approaches is to consider whether your love for your own beautiful self grows each day, knowing that there will be days of such self-disdain it might not be possible. And then you welcome in that small and wounded place and discover a hidden fountain of love beneath. Once we begin welcoming in the places we resist, we find that the deep peace of silence can be ours. Let us pray. Draw me to the warmth of your light, O God. Warm my spirit by your soft but mighty glow. Illumine my life's mission and service. Bless all who receive my gift of love. Bless all whose love I receive. Fill me with gratitude for every sign of hope, movement toward peace, expression of joy, and impulse to love. Amen. So our creativity today for our spiritual practice will be the creation of hearts. And granted, not a revolutionary thought on Valentine's Day, but I think in this year, a much needed to focus and send that love, spend some time in prayer, right? This is what this is about. This will be repeated patterns. Don't worry about whether or not you can think you can draw or not. You can doodle, you can repeat patterns. And this is a wonderful time then to sit in prayer for others who definitely this year, if they find Valentine's Day, even at the best of times, a difficult time for them, like we mentioned in the reading, then this year in particular will be very difficult. And then for those of us who, some self-love, sending some love our own way and some grace our own way is not something that we always do well for ourselves, is it? So this is also a time to sit in prayer and ask for some strength to do better for ourselves and to allow, like I say, to allow ourselves a little grace. So what we will need for today's art is fairly straightforward. At the basic, at the ultimate basic, now you can move beyond this, but at the basics, just some plain white paper, and that can be photocopy paper. This is just a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. Or if you happen to have cardstock, a piece of white or lightly colored cardstock is fine. A surface to work on, something that your Sharpie markers can bleed through. So again, I've just got some black Sharpie markers here, the fine point or the ultra fine. A pencil and eraser will come in handy. And if you want to, scissors, if you want to cut your cardstock or your paper into smaller pieces. This is not, so you're not feeling like you have to fill this whole thing, which could be a bit daunting for what we are, for the practice that we're aiming for. So some things, cut them in half, or even if you want to cut them in quarters and deal with something that size too, that's totally fine. Now, if you want to up your game, if you so you've seen the examples you've seen the examples here. If you want to do this with watercolor paper and watercolor paints instead, and if you have those things at home, by all means, go ahead. Or if you happen to have one of these sort of great bins at home that has all kinds of markers and things you've forgotten that you have around, metallics, gel pens, cool pencil crayons, multicolored pencil crayons, watercolor pencil crayons, then this is a time to experiment if you'd like as well. But basics, black and white is perfectly fine. So let's go into how exactly do we do our soul art squiggles and create this into a prayer. Okay, so I've got cardstock that's been cut in half and just a few plain sheets. And well, let me give you the close-up version. So here are a couple or three that I did the other day for this session today. And again, these are just repeated patterns, and they don't have to be exact. This is not necessarily about the precision, right? This is about that process. And because a repeated pattern allows you the calm and allows you to just to sort of go with the flow, allow the mind to focus either on this specifically, but it also allows you to spend that time holding someone else or yourself in prayer, right? Here's another, and this, so this is I've just cut this in a simple square, and drew the heart lightly in pencil, drew another little heart inside of it lightly in pencil so that I knew when I was doing the repetitive pattern that I wouldn't cover this up, because this is supposed to be like the hole where you see the pattern that you have behind this heart show through, right? And instead of doing all the little sort of negative space areas in black, I went ahead and did them in red, because that's how I felt. And here's another. This is simple. If all of the other, if some of the other patterns that I may show you, you think, oh, this is all far too complicated. And really, so it's not surprisingly complicated at all. And that's the beauty of it, that when you do it as a grouping like this, that a repetitive pattern looks far more complicated than it actually is when you break it down into its simplest parts. And this is just simply, right, taking a heart and doing either smaller hearts inside of it or doing larger hearts outside of it, and then coloring in again with the instead of doing it black behind all of the hearts, I've just gone ahead, and I thought I was using a red marker. It turns out it was raspberry, but that's okay because it's Valentine's Day and it's still all in my book, all part of the coloring system. And then I went ahead and just did one of the little rings. I could have done the whole heart. The example that I saw online took one of the whole hearts and colored the whole thing in a red. And then we're going to talk about shading too. The importance of shading, because it's surprising how much difference a little extra pencil shading will do for you. All right, so let's just go ahead and I'm just going to, well, I'll start with this one, because this one may initially seem far easier to some folks than others. So what you will need is, now this is all freehand, remember, right? There is no wrong, there are no mistakes. So you're doing this freehand. So we'll go ahead, and I'm going to start with my piece in landscape. And again, you can cut it down to a square if you would prefer. You can do the whole sheet if you would prefer.
this is just a little easier to manage. And I'm going to just start with a heart anywhere. Just start with a heart. Right? And then I am going to go ahead and I am going to draw a heart around it. Now what I'm going to try and do though is keep, even if it curls around, keep the points at the bottom of the heart and at the top of the heart somewhat in alignment. Now realizing that the heart's going to change shape, I understand that, so don't worry too much about that. And if you want the space between the lines to get larger, then that's fine too, or smaller or whatever. And then if you want this inside heart to be, add another smaller one inside, that's fine. So start with something like that. And then maybe start with sort of randomly. Now, the thing about repetitive patterns too is a lot of the time when we're doing this sort of filling in of a pattern, you want to change, you want to rotate the card, right? And not try and do things upside down with your hand. You want to rotate the card. So we've done one heart. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate. And then I'm going to do something smaller. And oops. But there is no wrong. Remember that. And then maybe I'm going to want to do one upside down, and we'll start sort of with a medium size. Right, and again, just trying to keep those points in alignment. And you can go off the card, that's okay. As long as you have a surface, of course, that you can do that in. But going off the card is a good thing, right? It just feels like it's continuing on, that there's motion beyond the life of just this little piece of paper. And again, you can add one on the inside once you've decided that. There we go. Now, to do others that are partially visible, right? So you can start one maybe just like this and just go to the edge of that other heart and then just continue on like you would have before. And as you're doing this, you can often, you can sit and, ask God to be present with you and ask God for strength to help hold individuals in your mind and in your heart while you are in conversation with God. And much like your prayer, coloring your prayers, you could imagine yourself and that other individual and God in space together, right? And hold whatever might be troubling that individual, or just saying, you're sending that love, you're thinking of them, and that this time is spent just with you and them and God, even though they may not necessarily know it. God, of course, does. And that love will be passed along. And you could finish that out from there. And then if you want to, if you don't want the background black, you could do all those little negative spaces in black if you'd like to. And if You know, just take your black Sharpie and carefully go in, and then just fill in those black sections like that. Again, that gives depth to the piece. Or, much like this, go ahead and go in with a different color. And it could be, I mean, it could be anything, right? Again, if you've got one of these, go ahead and feel free to create however you would like. And if you want, you know, if you want the background to be in red, then you can always just go in and all those little negative spaces, all those little openings that would technically sort of be in the background, go ahead and color those in, because that's what will really give the piece some dimension. And enjoy the process, right? Enjoy that simple coloring once you get all the doodling done. And just don't forget to breathe, you know, keep the deep breathing going. Perhaps maybe it's just keep telling yourself, you know, when you breathe in, you're breathing in love, and on the way out, you're breathing out gratitude. And then if you decide that one heart you want more pronounced than any other, and it doesn't have to be the one that is on the top, right, that has all the others underneath. It could be one that is perhaps partially covered, or it could be maybe just this little guy over here. And let me just, right. And now as far as shading goes, so one of the things that I had said was about keeping try to sort of keep this in alignment. It could still curve as you're creating the hearts, but from a shading standpoint, it's just easier. I don't know if you can see it on here, and if you don't necessarily see it, obviously, then that's partly a good thing. But through the center creases, there is some pencil shading happening initially, right? So that's the first place that you want to go. So you want to color in the whole thing first. Do your background, do your hearts, or whatever you're going to do at that point. And then I find if you're using a softer pencil, mechanical pencils aren't great unless you've got a really soft lead in it. This is just your average run-of-the-mill HB type of pencil. And on the side, right, and if you're finding that you want to just sort of get used to using it on the side, go ahead with your scratch paper here and just get used to, that's easier to create shading than trying to shade like this. All right, this just gives it a softer blend. So you just go ahead and I do a light line right down the center first, and then I might just along that do a little bit out the sides as though it were, you know, sort of curving out and up. Right. And then maybe just a little along here. Right. And then go through each one. And then once you get all of your spaces done like that, right, then take your finger and just rub it right straight through the pencil. And it just takes away it softens it, takes away the harsh edges. But now you can see there's just this little bit of sense that there's some dimension happening here, right? If you want to do it little by little, just if you're not sure what it's going to look like, that's fine. Just go little by little then, and rub it out with your finger, right? And if your sort of alignment sort of curves, then curve along with it. Just follow it along. Again, add a little to the sides. like it's curling up and out. And then just rub it down with your finger. All right, and that gives it some depth. And then if you want to, the ones that are laying over top of, technically they would also be casting shadow. So if you want to add just a little bit of shade around that, and again, just use your finger to soften it a bit, suddenly then it looks like it's really actually lifted, right? It's lifted above. So same here, this one's overlapping. And this is what really makes a difference. This is what you will find for your own pieces, that this will really make it feel like there's a little more life to your piece, right? But you see how even just this little bit, any of these overlapping spaces, how it just makes it feel like suddenly that heart's standing out a little bit more, right? That there's actually, you now have a true sense of that layering. So that's a lot of fun. So just go ahead. I mean, if that's all that you feel that you can manage, that is perfectly fine. If you are wanting to do, and now that's a repetitive pattern, but let's just talk about some of the other types of repetitive patterns. We talked about whether or not you prefer circles over, you know, lines and that kind of thing. So say you've got your heart here, and maybe you want to fill it in with a scallop sort of edging and work in that way. So you would just go ahead along the edge of your pencil line. Whoops. Marker, dead. Just make these little sort of half moon shapes, right? And leave a little space in between them. Right, and then from there, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and add little lines around it. And then you're going to go back in and you're going to make another. You're going to just keep making rows of these. So you've got something like that. And then shading again, right? So again, to create that look of something that's rounded, we're going to go ahead and you can just, first of all, just shade in the very center a bit. Shade through each one of those little, what appear to be valleys, right? And I'm just going to reshade some of those because it didn't look like it was enough. There we go. And then I'm just going to run my finger along each of them just to blend it a bit. Right? And then suddenly it actually does look like there are all these like little tubes of, or like a little corrugated tube. And maybe in the center then you want to put some sort of you know, maybe you want to put a little red heart in the center or something like that. And you could go ahead and you could, oh, and then the pencil lines around the outside, go ahead and erase. Okay. And I suppose, here's a word of the wise. If probably erase those lines before you go ahead and do the shading, because your shading's going to go up to the edge like that. And at this point, then you'd sort of be erasing some of your shading. So, yeah, didn't fully think it through. Sorry about that. But there's another good example of repetitive pattern, right? Okay. So we've got the heart. And if you wanted to do sort of the ribbon kind of technique, and most of these examples I've sent out to you, right? So I won't spend too much more time. But again, don't do it in pencil. Do another thin ribbon, oops, next to it. And it doesn't have to be exact, right? And then I am going to give it a little space and then sort of follow the same shape. And then another little thin ribbon. And sometimes I find that pulling, you may find, it's up to you, but pulling when it comes to lines like this, if I'm trying to keep them really close, that pulling towards me seems to be easier than pushing away. Okay, just something to think about. It may not make a difference to you at all. And it may. It's hard to say. All right, and let's do one more. To do. Now you could do the next one continuing off from here if you would like, or you could start it in the same corner, so it's sort of the same pattern. That's up to you. You know what, let's try it from here and see where it takes us. Okay. And then once you've got something like that, then again, it is about the shading, right? And I would go ahead and shade sort of, you could shade around the edge of the pattern this way. You know, maybe this is the only part of the pattern that you want. Maybe you want to fill, or maybe you want to fill the rest of it in with another color and a pattern. Right? Maybe you want to do the reds, maybe you want to do the purples or something, and maybe you want to do sort of like these circular patterns, right? And it's about bigs and littles, and you just sort of squeeze them in, you butt them right up against the line that was there. You can just sort of do some random so you don't forget to do some larger ones in there. And they don't have to be perfectly round, right? So this is the fun thing about this one, is it's just sort of whatever space you happen to have or whatever shape you just squeeze them on in there. Again, I think we've done this one when we've talked about perhaps filling in a path, right? It's much like if it were a pathway that you were doing through your garden, or a pathway you needed to follow. It was part of your journey. Like that. And you would do that throughout the other side. And And then you would add your shading, right? And you could just shade it up like that, maybe that side, right? You want it to be above. And then, and you would do the same on the other side if you had it, filled in with the little hearts there, or those circles. And you're just gonna go along. Right, and then just run your finger along. And then with each of these, again, you want that overlapping depth, right? So where each place that it overlaps, just add right above it, just add a little shadow. And already you can see the difference between the side that has no shadow and the side that does, right? There's a little more shadow here. And it definitely makes it feel more dimensional. There's more depth to it. All right, and again, then when you're done, and you can just take your finger and just simply rub it along those lines just to soften it up a bit. And there you have. Okay, so that, for the most part, with the examples that I had sent, and again, if you're doing with the little cutout, just remember to, wherever you happen to have the cutout, maybe you want it right in the center, and then whatever pattern you are doing behind, keep that open, and then continue the pattern through the center, and then continue it out the other side. And it could be completely filled, right? It didn't have to just be this one ribbon of pattern behind it. You could do it completely filled. But then adding the shadow, right? This heart, this larger one, is up front, so I've just added a little shadow around the outside. And again, to give that depth, you would add a little bit of shadow wherever your cutout is, add a little shadow there as well. All right, so enjoy that. It's a lot of fun it is very relaxing, and it is fun once you get the hang of it. So don't be afraid. Give yourself some time to try it out. And like I say, if you've got any questions, you can ask me at the end of the session. And you've got the other examples in your email, and just enjoy being in that state of calm, and allow yourself to make mistakes. You don't want to get yourself worked up about it. And keep your friends, your family, those that maybe you don't even know, that you've heard about from other individuals, or perhaps an incident on the news has you concerned, and hold those individuals in prayer. All right, so that is how we do our Valentine's Day contemplative art. Wonderful. Now that you are ready to center and get into your time of prayer and your contemplative mindset, we'll refocus and recenter with our breathing. And before I let you go, don't forget to play some music as well while you're doing this. You don't have to do this in silence. Sometimes music helps calm and allow the creativity, right, to happen. Go with the flow, see where it takes you. But let's go ahead and we'll recenter. So feet flat on the floor if you can, and your back up as straight as you can, so that you can get a good deep breath in. And as you breathe in, I want you to breathe in love. And on the way out, breathing out gratitude. Oh, and breathing in love. And breathing out gratitude. And one more time, breathing in love. And breathing out gratitude. And together we say, Creator God, quiet my mind before it passes judgment on this prayer, my gift of time to you. Amen. Enjoy this time of prayer when you hopefully will feel enveloped in love, or like a warm blanket or a hug. This is your hug for yourself at this time. It's a hug for others whom you're sending and holding in prayer and sending that love to. And I hope that your Valentine's Day is filled with much love for all. Have a wonderful week.